Hey everybody, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this week's iteration of our Friday speaker series. My name is Mr. Jeremy. I'm very, very happy to welcome you all and to welcome Ms. Nina Chase of Merritt Chase Landscape Architects, and our faithful intern, Ms. Maddie, is going to read her bio and kick us off. Thank you, Ms. Nina and Ms. Maddie.
Jeremy.
Okay. Nina is a founding principal of Merritt Chase. As a registered landscape architect, Nina works to position public spaces as the foundational building blocks of communities. Born and raised in West Virginia, Nina is a graduate of Harvard Graduate School of Design and West Virginia University. She is formerly an associate at Sasaki and senior project manager at Riverlife. Nina's work has received national recognition from the American Society of Landscape Architects, the Landscape Architecture Foundation, and the Architectural League of New York. Nina's professional experience is additionally informed by a commitment to the design community through teaching, writing, and volunteering. Nina frequently lectures and serves as a design critic nationally and internationally. Nina is formerly an adjunct faculty member at Carnegie Mellon School of Architecture and a emeritus board of the Landscape Architecture Foundation. Currently, Nina is a member of the City of Pittsburgh Contextual Design Advisory Committee and the Vice President of the Lawrenceville Corporation's Board of Directors. So if you would all please give a warm welcome to our speaker today, Nina Chase.
Miss Maddie, could you put her bio in the chat, please?
Sure thing.
Should I take it away?
Yeah, please, absolutely, all you.
Thanks. Well, thanks for the invite, and it's nice to be with you guys today. I live in Pittsburgh. I don't know how many of you are. I think you're all in Pittsburgh, right? Except Maddie, you're 5 hours away somewhere. I live in Lawrenceville, but I grew up in Morgantown, West Virginia, just about an hour and a half south of Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh was always the big city growing up in West Virginia, because we don't have many big cities in West Virginia. So we were Steelers fans and Penguins and Pirates fans down in West Virginia. But yeah, I've been in Pittsburgh for almost 5 years now. After I went to West Virginia University, as Maddie mentioned, I went to WVU for undergrad in landscape architecture. And then I went to grad school in Boston at Harvard for landscape architecture for my master's, worked there for a number of years. And then 5 years ago came to Pittsburgh. And I worked for a nonprofit for a little while called Riverlife that does riverfront planning and development in the city on all three of our riverfronts, and then started my firm, Merritt Chase, which I'll talk a little bit more about, with my business partner, Chris Merritt, about 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago. And I have a presentation I wanted to share, but before I jump in, I wanted to ask how many of you know about landscape architecture as a profession? Anybody? Okay, because I had no idea that it existed as a profession, and it's okay, kinda. We have a kinda good. I didn't know it was an option in middle school, high school, even until my second year in college, and I made the switch. I went to another college for a year, wasn't a right fit for me. I came back to West Virginia University, and they had a landscape architecture program. And so I took an intro to landscape architecture class and just fell in love with it. But it was there that I really learned what it was. And I had originally in high school had been pretty good at art and math and science. And so a lot of my mentors and career counselors were telling me to go into architecture because it was kind of a blend of art and science and engineering. And I always, my parents traveled a good bit, and we would travel with them. And I always loved going to cities and kind of checking out new buildings. And so architecture was the path that I took immediately out of high school. But it was taking this intro to landscape architecture course at West Virginia University that really made me realize that it was not the buildings that I was most excited about. It was really the spaces between the buildings in cities that excited me more. So thinking about all those outdoor spaces like parks, even your sidewalk or your streets, thinking about waterfronts, riverfronts here in Pittsburgh, plazas, campuses, gardens, things like that. Those are all the types of spaces between buildings that we as landscape architects design. Does anybody, to the person who said kinda, what do you know about landscape architecture right now? I'm just interested if you like know somebody who's a landscape architect or if you've just heard about it.
Oh, well, right now I know like architects, they like design properties or like houses and design like the rooms and what's inside of them. So like sort of stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and we work with architects all the time. So and we call them building architects. They don't like when we call them that, but they're building architects and we're landscape architects. So we design all the outdoor spaces and they design the indoor spaces and the structures that you obviously inhabit as a, if it's your home or your school or your, place where you work. But yeah, so let me share my screen real quick. What I wanted to talk to you guys about, so what I thought I'd share with you is a little bit about just my company, Merritt Chase, and then just to give you kind of a framework of what we do and who we are, and then walk you through kind of what we do as landscape architects on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and the name of this presentation is The Power of Public Space, because we do a lot of work in the public space of cities. So there are some landscape architects who purely do residential work, like they will design somebody's backyard or their pool or their front yard. And then there are other landscape architects who do more work like what we do, which is working with cities. Like we work with the city of Pittsburgh to design parks and playgrounds and waterfronts or streets, like in this image here. And we also work with large institutions like Carnegie Mellon. We work with them to design their outdoor spaces outside their buildings. We haven't worked with Pitt before, but Pitt's a group that we've been talking to, and we work in Oakland, up and down Forbes and Fifth Avenue. But we do a lot of work, and a lot of that work is focused on public space, so the spaces that we kind of all share in our cities. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that today. But before I dive into that, this is my business partner, Chris, and this is myself. We're on a construction site. This is our first project. I started my career up in the Boston area, and so a couple of our projects are still up in the Boston area. Yes, Jeremy's excited. And Chris and I both worked together at an office, and a larger architecture office in Boston for a number of years, and learned that we worked really well together. I'm a little bit more of a big picture thinker, and he's a detail kind of person. And so as a pairing of skills, we work really well together, because for all of our projects, we have to both think big about how a landscape fits into a city, but we also have to think really small about how to build something and how to get the details right so that it can be built and look really nice. And so the two of us have been working together now for 8 years, and have had the firm for 3.5 years. And we have 5 people who we work with in our office, and we are landscape architects, but we're also urban designers. Is anybody familiar with urban design as a profession? Yeah, head nodding. Yes, maybe. So urban designers are kind of similar to landscape architects, but urban designers don't typically build things. So they are thinking about the design of a city, and then they pass it off to a landscape architect or an architect to actually build a project. And so we do both things. We like to think big like urban designers, and then build outdoor spaces as landscape architects. And so we as a team are thinking about both those things and work that way. We're also based in the Midwest and Appalachia. So I'm here in Pittsburgh, the Paris of Appalachia, and we have our office here and a lot of projects that we work on here. And then my business partner is based in Indianapolis in the Midwest. And actually before COVID, we were working remotely together for the last few years and have continued to do that with COVID, but we work in Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, and then a lot of different cities kind of in between those two cities. So we also work in Cleveland and Detroit, and we've worked in Minneapolis, and where else? Columbus. So we're kind of in between lots of good Midwest and Appalachian cities. And all of our work, we really like to find meaning in public space, and meaning can mean a lot of different things, and you'll see that in some of the work that I show you, but sometimes that's looking at a history of a place and bringing that to light in our design work, or it's about making connections between neighborhoods that may have historically been not connected, but finding meaningful connections, or working with meaningful, and I realize there's a spelling error here. Run spell check, everybody, don't do this. Or we will pick materials and work with fabricators who make things to make something really beautiful in a space, or find some piece of history and bring it to the surface. And so we're always kind of working to find really interesting meaning in place, and making sure that the landscapes that we design are reflective of the communities that we work with, and are specific and unique to a place. So we don't like to come in and just tell everybody what they should do. We do a lot of listening, and we do a lot of research and understanding of the history of a place before we ever propose anything. And we are always working with communities very closely to make sure that whatever the landscape looks like at the end is reflective of the neighborhood and the community that's there. And so we do that in a lot of different ways, I'm going to go through kind of our design process to give you a glimpse into how we work. But the end result of all of our work is always a physical place outside. So as I mentioned, we design gardens, we design streets. Sometimes those are the actual streets for cars. Other times it's something like this, like a little parklet, which takes over a parking spot and makes it a place to hang out and sit and eat food. And this is actually downtown in Pittsburgh. If anybody's been downtown, it's on Liberty Avenue. We design plazas, so places that don't have a lot of greenery but are for sitting and eating and hanging out. We design large parks. We design waterfronts. This is some work that Chris and I had done at our previous firm in Chicago, so the Chicago River Walk. And then we also do a lot of work designing campuses, so university campuses, high school campuses, institutional campuses for museums and other organizations that own a lot of land. And in any of those projects, what we really like to figure out is how the public space, or how that project can really serve the greater good of a city or a community that it's in through its public space, and in the spaces that we all kind of share together as a community. And so we think about public space as this kind of foundational building block for a city, and that the landscape, the spaces between cities, really becomes what makes a city great. And it's what these spaces are, the places that allow a diverse group of people to come together and congregate and interact and get to know each other. And it's where we really, where you can fall in love with your city, or you can meet other people and be together as a community. And so the public spaces of our cities, those plazas, those parks, it's the democratic space that we all share and we all kind of own collectively, and we get to use collectively. And so we like to think about that, as I mentioned, kind of as a platform almost for a city, and it's the spaces between, it's that public space between the buildings that we as landscape architects have the true privilege to work with folks to design and implement. And this quote, I think, is kind of nice to think about that, just what public space can mean for a community. This is Mayor Joe Riley, who was the mayor of Charleston, South Carolina for like 40 years. And he says, the public realm, what all citizens own together, has a collective value that is essential to the quality of life of a community. And he's pretty well known in the planning and design worlds for really harnessing and advocating for good design and good public space in Charleston, South Carolina. And if anyone has been to Charleston, you know that the parks and the streets and the open spaces are really beautiful and wonderful, and allow for community to come together, and have really made that city. The other thing that's really interesting about public space is that when we usually think of cities, actually, I'll ask you guys this question. What comes to mind when I say city? What comes to mind? You can put it in the chat or say it out loud.
New York.
And what do you think about when you think about New York? Like, do you visualize anything in particular?
Always.
Downtown, yeah.
Times
Times Square. Oh, that's good. That's a great public space. Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of times when I ask this question and when I think of cities, I often think of, in my mind's eye, I'll like picture buildings, and I'll think about the like tall skyscrapers and those kind of things. Somebody said nice paved side streets and walks. Yeah, great. You guys you could all be landscape architects. This is good. You don't need to know this. And I think often when you're thinking about cities, you're thinking about the buildings and not necessarily sometimes the open spaces. But what's really exciting as landscape architects is that actually most cities are about half of a city is made up of public spaces. So about half of a city is made up of buildings when you look at them, but then the other half is made up of open spaces like parks and waterfronts and plazas, and the other 30% is made up of the streets and the sidewalks, and that makes up about 50% of a city is left over space between those buildings that landscape architects can design. And so you can kind of see that here. This is it's a figure ground diagram of Pittsburgh, so you can see the buildings in the light gray and the roads in the like medium gray, and then everything that's left over, the darkest color here, that's all the outdoor spaces, the public spaces. You know, and some of these are owned by private landowners, but you can see how much land there is that is outside, that is has the potential to be designed. And so as landscape architects, we're always thinking about these spaces in between the buildings. And as I mentioned, they're all made up of these different types of outdoor spaces like gardens and streets and plazas and parks, waterfronts and campuses. Does anybody have any questions about landscape architecture just at the beginning? The rest of the presentation is about our design process and how we work, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those now.
Can we see some of your work that you did?
Yeah, I'm gonna show you some projects here. Yeah, I'll go into that right now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we do that work. So I think everything that I just said is, you know, lofty goals for what landscape architects aspire to do. And we do that through the design process. And for us, that design process includes a lot of different steps. And I wanted to kind of share a little bit of a couple of those steps so that you can have a sense of what we do on a daily basis. The first step in any design process for us is really about engagement and listening and learning from the people who live or work or play in the place that we're about to be designing. And we do engagement in a lot of different ways that I wanted to show. We then, after we do a lot of engagement, we do a lot of design work and illustrations and graphics to show what we're envisioning for the future. And we use renderings. We use a lot of Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and AutoCAD to draw what a future place could look like. So we illustrate our designs, and then we take our illustrations and we build the projects physically. So we then draw all of our designs in CAD, and we do construction drawings that look more like engineered drawings than design drawings, and I'll share a couple of those for examples. And then we work with general contractors, who are the folks who physically build the projects, and we work with them. I don't lay bricks or plant trees, but I work with a lot of people who lay bricks and plant trees, and I give them drawings that I've made to communicate what we want the final landscape to look like. So it's through this design process that we actually build all of these projects. So the first stage of this process, the engagement stage, this includes a lot of, we go to a lot of meetings, we present to large groups. Sometimes we're standing up in front of a room and explaining a project or a design idea. Other times, and these times are more fun, is when we actually get to design with communities, and we bring lots of big drawings and markers and pens and paper, and we get around a big table and draw and get feedback on designs together. So this was for a project in Morgantown, West Virginia, that we designed a riverfront just recently. We were working with community members to get feedback on a design that we had presented. So you can see this. This is a plan view drawing on the right, and we were getting feedback directly that people didn't want to have trees right on the riverfront here, and they wanted to move a couple things over, and so we were working with them through that process. But we'll do that often multiple times at the beginning of a project to get feedback on design ideas from community members. We also go to what we prefer to do instead of asking people to come to us. We'll go to them in their neighborhoods and set up in a variety of places. So this is at a manufacturing fabricator who makes a lot of bags and shirts and other products in Indianapolis, and bringing with us lots of images of landscapes and getting feedback from folks about what they'd like to see based on those images. So a lot of these images are from other places, and we have the green and red dots to ask people, you know, do you like this or do you not like this? Would you like to see this here? Or do you not want to see this here? And doing exercises like that to get feedback in real time from people who live in the neighborhood. We've gone to church, so we've set up boards. So you can see this is for a project on the right-hand side. This is another plan that we were doing for a project in Indianapolis, and getting feedback directly from neighbors who go to a church just on the outskirts of the project boundary, and hearing from everybody what they'd like to see and being able to get that feedback directly. We just recently set up at a grocery store. Recently we did a drive-in kind of movie theater style presentation because we weren't able to gather as a group inside with because of COVID, but we're able to get feedback from folks from their cars, which was pretty interesting. We're doing a lot of Zoom sessions lately. We also build models. So this is this is made out of chipboard, which is essentially what cereal boxes are made out of. It's a 3D model that's been laser cut, and then these little plastic pieces were 3D printed. And this is a model of Polish Hill here in Pittsburgh. So if anyone's familiar, the Strip District is here, Hill District is up here. And this is Bigelow Boulevard. Just along here. So if you take a right here, this will take you up into the Hill District, and then down here goes into Polish Hill.
Sorry, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Is that CNC'd out of a big press block? Is that a CNC that did that?
Individual sheets that were cut and then glued together. So you can
Oh, wow. So you actually did the layers rather than layering, gluing, and then CNC. Wow.
Yes, okay. You can see the little layers down here.
Wow.
Sometimes we will work with, we'll do a CNC milled model. This one, because of time and expense, CNC machines and that kind of work can get expensive. This is using a laser cutter. And we worked with a student at CMU who was a former student of mine who made this. And then he 3D printed all these little, I'm gonna just draw on these are actually all stairs. So
oh, wow.
Steps that are in Polish Hill. I think there are 11. This was last year, and I'm now already forgetting how many there were, but we were doing a project on the steps in Polish Hill and designing different ways to activate the steps in Polish Hill as part of an art project.
Very cool. Sorry for my nerdy question to interrupt.
No, anybody jump in. I'd love to answer the questions. And so you can see, but this is like some of the stuff that we do. We build models, and then this was during the Polish Hill Arts Festival. We set up a booth, and we're asking Polish Hill neighbors which steps they use the most and which steps they wanted to see fixed up. And so we were asking them to put little pins where they use the steps or add little comments on these flags. So we were able to get feedback and decide which steps we were going to do an event on. We also build things so in addition to having like public meetings or showing up with a lot of drawings to get feedback, we also like to get creative with how we get feedback or test ideas. And this is a project called Kid of Parks that we designed that is, it's a portable playground. And so we were working in Boston, and this is with the Boston Parks and Rec Department. It's a little portable playground that can be put on the back of a bike and biked around and then set up wherever we thought might be a good spot for a playground, and get feedback from people and how they used it or where they'd want to see another playground. And so this is my friend Philip here on the bike, and then we'd unpack it and play. And there were beanbag toss and Jenga and tables and chairs and all sorts of little elements that people could play with. But we were able to get some really nice feedback about where people wanted to play in the city. This is in Pittsburgh. This is as part of a larger master plan for the Strip District, getting feedback from folks about what they wanted to see happen on the riverfront in the Strip District by doing a pop-up park. And so we had a pop-up riverfront park for a whole day where we built these tables out of plywood and got umbrellas and chairs, and then had a bunch of food trucks and vendors come out, and we were able to then use these boards here and gather feedback about what people wanted to see in the Strip District while we were in the Strip District, and so getting that feedback in real time. And then, so after our engage phase, which can look very different for every single project, you know, sometimes we build models, sometimes we print out big drawings, sometimes we do a pop-up park. All of that work then informs what we then start to illustrate in this phase, which is where we really take all the ideas and start to do a lot of different drawings, and we share those drawings and we get feedback on those drawings. I saw someone just asked, how has COVID impacted your work? And I can answer that here in a second, but really good question. And so on this screen, you can see this is work that I was doing at my former firm at Sasaki, the firm I used to work for in Boston. And this is in the Strip District. And these are some of the drawings that we do. They're called renderings, and we use Photoshop as the tool to make them. And essentially we're showing everybody what something will look like in the future. So this is a vision for a plaza in the Strip District. And it was part of a large plan. So here we're looking at a map, the Allegheny River, Washington's Landing, Strip District, Polish Hill. Actually, that model I showed you was like right over here. You probably can't see my mouse, but the model I showed you of Polish Hill was over here before. So we're in the Strip District, and this was a plan looking at the riverfront in and along the Allegheny River in the Strip District, and designing all these different plazas at the ends of these streets, and then thinking about a whole trail system in the Strip District, and how it could connect up into the larger trail network in the city of Pittsburgh. But this plan is one of the types of drawings that we typically create. So we'll do renderings, these kind of perspective renderings that show what it looks like to be a person on the ground looking at this space. But then we also do plan view drawings. Sometimes they look like this, where they look kind of painted. Other times they look a little more technical. But these are some examples of some of the work that we do in order to communicate the designs that we have in our head. How do we communicate that to everybody? These are some examples of smaller plans. So we zoom in on that bigger plan, and we zoom in and look at different materials and start to have a conversation about the cost of different materials and what we can incorporate into a project based on cost. And so this is always part of this kind of process of, we design something, we then get a cost estimate, understanding how much it's going to cost, and then usually have to go back and tweak a couple things because everything's usually more expensive than we want it to be. But then we finally get to something at the end, kind of working back and forth with our client or with a community. We also are often looking at the ecology of a place. So this is a section drawing. This is another type of drawing that we use, where we will cut a section through a place and look at relationships in section. So not in plan, but in section. And this drawing here is talking about different types of habitat that we were designing. So we were designing for birds and least weasels and underwater habitat for fish. And then also looking at different plants on the riverbank, what types of plants would do well in wetter conditions at the lower level closer to the river, or as you move up to the trail, looking at plants that do better without as much water. And then, so we engage with our clients and community, we illustrate our design ideas in a variety of different ways, and then we ultimately have to build something. And as I mentioned, we have to, since we're not the ones physically building the work, and there are some landscape architects who do build projects, but we don't, we have to communicate our design idea, not just through pretty plans and renderings. We have to do it through technical drawings that are more engineering drawings, so someone knows how to build something. And so I wanted to share a project. This is called Bow Market. This is up in Somerville, Massachusetts. this is during the construction phase of the project. This is what it looked like. And we were working with an architect who was designing the building, and then we were the landscape architect. So everything on the ground was work that we were involved with. And after about 6 months, it ended up looking like this, with all these new pavers, with these new walls and stairs, these 2 new trees. And all these entries up to the first floor. But to get there, we had to do a lot of work to draw the project using these technical drawings, construction drawings. I did want to share just a couple. These are some of the more illustrative drawings that we did to communicate our project before we had to get into construction. But this is the courtyard that you just saw a photo of. So these are the walls and the steps and the ramps and the 2 trees. We did that kind of 3D view. We did this plan. This is more of an illustrative plan. So again, this courtyard, those 2 trees that you saw, and the ramp and the stairs. But in order to build it, we have to create drawings that look like this, that are a little less exciting than maybe this, but this is the drawing that we use with the contractor who will be out there with their team building the project. And so we have to give the contractor lots of dimensions and give them all the information about what the materials should be, what it should look like, where those materials should come from, how big all those materials should be, how many of all the things need to be ordered ahead of time. And so we create construction drawing sets that include drawings that look like this. And then there are also lots of drawings that look like this. So these are little smaller drawings that we do. So this, like here on the right or on the left, that kind of, I'm gonna go back to this image, these big granite blocks right here and these steps, they had to be what's called detailed, and in a construction drawing set, they're like smaller detailed drawings. So you can see these are the big concrete or big granite blocks that are pinned in place into a concrete base. But we draw all these things so that the contractor knows how to build them. And often we make the drawings, we talk to a contractor, and then work back and forth with them throughout the process to make sure that it ends up looking like what we had in our heads. We do a lot of research related to how to find materials and where materials can come from. And for this project, we ended up using a lot of recycled or reclaimed materials. The granite that I mentioned had come from the renovation of a famous bridge in the Boston area called the Longfellow Bridge was getting renovated. And we were able to find the granite that had come off of that renovation and was being stored at a reclaimed granite company, and work with them to use that granite to build the steps and seat elements. And then we also worked with a lumber company to use reclaimed lumber that came from a shipbuilding facility. These were old big beams that had been in the ceiling of this big warehouse. And we we're able to reclaim that wood and use it on top of the granite. So you can see here on the right-hand side, some of that wood in this kind of new step seating element. And this was it getting constructed. So you can see this is that wood. We were working with the contractor here. He has this big tool over on the left, lifting all the pieces of wood into place. On the right, you can see these are the pavers that are getting laid out, and then the granite steps you can kind of see peeking out underneath the plastic here, the big granite steps, and then the more polished granite stairs here. But this is what it looked like during construction. And then when it finally got realized, this is what it looks like in the end. So that detail that I showed you of the granite steps, that's what ended up resulting in this big granite couch here, and then the pavers over here. And what's kind of cool when you look at those detailed drawings is that you realize there's a lot that happens under the ground for all projects that you might not really know about otherwise, but a lot goes into the foundations and the structural kind of integrity of these large pieces to make sure that things don't start sinking or a tree falls over or something. There are lots of ways that we have to work with the contractor to make sure everything's safe and in place in the right way. Here's another image of that big granite seat wall. So this is kind of so I'm gonna flip back to that construction detail just so you can see, but you can see, you know, the step, that kind of thing, and the big pieces of granite were then pinned in underneath. I'm just going to flip back to just so you can see it. So this is it's flipped, but that's essentially the drawing that we did that then the contractor took to build the seat here.
Ms. Nina, I'm sorry to interrupt. We had a question in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, I missed it.
It said, I hope it's not rude for me to ask, but who funds these projects or dreams for architectural construction in different, or are you guys nonprofit?
That's a good question. We are not a nonprofit, so we're a for-profit company. We are a limited liability company, an LLC, and we have lots of different clients who get their money in lots of different ways. So, for example, we are working with the city of Pittsburgh right now on a playground project, and that money has come from a grant that the city of Pittsburgh gets, and then they pay us through that grant. For this project that you see on our screen, we were working with a developer. So this was private land owned by a developer in the Boston area. And they had investors that were investing in their company, and that money paid us a design fee to do the work that we do. So typically, construction projects cost, say a construction project costs $1 million or more, or whatever, we will see like a percentage of that construction budget as our what's called a design fee. So that's how we get paid. And for landscape architects it's typically 10% of a construction budget. For landscape architects, it's 10% of 10%. So it's 1% of the construction budget if we're lucky. But that's typically how we get paid. And sometimes sometimes we work for nonprofits, but we are not a nonprofit. I don't know if that helps answer that question. That was a little roundabout way of answering that question, but yes. Yeah, so those are the projects I wanted to share. And I'm happy to answer more questions about landscape architecture as a profession, how I got to landscape architecture. I'm happy to answer questions like that. Or if you want to talk about the design process, I'm also happy to talk about that as well. And I can bring any of that back up too if anybody is interested. Oh, Michael had asked also about COVID, how it's impacted our work. It has impacted our work a lot in the way that we typically do our engagement. And so that first phase of our design process, engagement has been much harder to do now because we can't gather in large groups and get feedback from people in the way that we used to. So we used to do that, as I showed, around big tables, or we do a pop-up kind of event and get people to provide feedback, and we'd have listening sessions. But now we have to do all of that virtually. So we're using a lot of Zoom. The city of Pittsburgh, actually, I'm gonna bring this up because I think this would be great for you all to see. Can you see my screen? Okay. So the city of Pittsburgh during, because of COVID, has created a whole virtual engagement platform. Can you see my screen? It says Engage PGH. Okay. No.
Sorry, it just says questions.
Oh, I think because it is accidentally sharing just this other. How about now?
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Okay. So the city of Pittsburgh, we're working on 2 projects with them right now, and all of the projects that the city, so this is through their Department of City Planning or Department of Public Works. Any project that's happening right now that they are requesting feedback from residents and business owners and whoever lives in those areas near the projects can find the project on this website. So it's engage.pittsburghpa.gov. And what's nice about this is it's basically a virtual space to get feedback on projects. And we're working on the Highland Park Super Playground. Anybody been there? Highland Park Super Playground? Yeah, it's getting renovated. So if you want to provide your feedback, please do. And on this, each project has its own page, and it's here that we are gathering feedback about the project and providing updates on the project. So right now we're in the design stage. So we are, we had a couple different options that we were looking at. and a couple different types of playground structures. So this is one option. This was another option, and you're able to give feedback on the project directly here. We also had a survey at one point. We have an activity for kids to draw, their future playground that they want to see. And so we were gathering lots of great ideas from kids who use and love the playground. So those are kind of fun. You can go through that. And then there's also just like a update on, how where the project is in its process. So we're right here in the public engagement and design portion. But so in terms of directly impacting our work, the virtual world of engagement has been something that we've had to do more of than we used to. The benefit of being landscape architects is all of our work does involve being outside. So we have still been able to continue the construction of our projects safely because we're able to be outside, social distanced, wearing masks and everything, but our construction projects have still continued going on. And hopefully, once people are vaccinated and we're getting back gathering together, we'll be able to do more of our in-person engagement. Yeah. We're also working remotely, so that was something we were doing before, but more of now. So that's always a little trickier to design with other people remotely. And I do want to stress that I never design anything by myself. It's never just like one single person designing something. That's kind of I think a myth of architects and architecture is that there's like one white dude, old white guy who like designs everything. And really it's a conversation and a much bigger process that involves tens, if not hundreds of people for every single project. And so we're always working with lots of people. And while I might be managing the project to make sure it gets done, there are lots of people and voices who are at the table who actually realize all of the work. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
No one has any other questions for Ms. Nina?
Have I ever done any work on like programs for like kids or like teens like in a neighborhood? That's not something like after school or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have we done after school programs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, a little bit for this Highland Park project, it's been done virtually, which is not ideal, but we've been working with and distributing these worksheets to kids to kind of design their dream playground. And we don't have that many. We do a lot of college work where we'll meet with like student groups and get feedback that way, but we haven't worked with any high schools yet. We're actually interviewing for a high school project next week, but I haven't worked with high school students or after school programs yet for a project, but we're always, interested in doing that kind of work.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I had a quick question. I was just kind of curious about what your favorite place to design is. I know it was like a list of 6 different places that you usually work on, like gardens, streets, or waterfronts, campuses. Which is your favorite to work on?
I love like urban plazas, like places in cities like Market Square and we didn't design Market Square, but like a place like Market Square that is surrounded by lots of fun businesses and there's a lot of life and activity happening, and it becomes kind of a platform for communities and people, other just human beings to come together and be together outside. Those are my favorite types of places to work on and be in. I think too is just I like those places in cities. And then probably second to that are waterfronts, just because it's always nice to be near the water, and we're so lucky here in Pittsburgh to have so much riverfront access, and it's just such a beautiful, great asset. And I think what's really amazing in Pittsburgh is that there's still so much potential and so many places to provide better access to the riverfronts here. And so those are things that we're always thinking about, is how maybe in a city, especially like Pittsburgh, where there are a lot of open spaces and outdoor spaces that might be underutilized or not really accessible. How can we make them accessible and open them up to become places where people can gather and be? That was part of our project on the city steps in Polish Hill. You know, the city steps are typically just like a circulation route down a hill. And we were kind of asking the question, what if instead of just a circulation route, we thought of them as vertical parks and start to think about the steps as like places to hang out, or, you know, provide a little overlook or a little picnic spot, or add some trees next to them, or be able to collect some stormwater or something to help with some environmental issues, and just having different ways to think about underutilized spaces like the steps or riverfronts in Pittsburgh gets me really excited. So we're always on the lookout. So if you know of spots.
Awesome, thank you.
Is that it for everybody?
Anybody want to be a landscape architect? Happy to take you on that path. Yeah.
Well, I know that you said that you majored in landscape architecture. Was
Mhm.
that your little kid dream, being like, you know, outside playing in dirt and putting like, rocks on rocks and stuff?
Not necessarily. I was saying at the beginning that I was always in high school. I was pretty good at drawing and was in art classes. And then I also really loved biology for Virginia. It was one of my favorite classes, and I was pretty good at math. And so there was kind of this like STEM, like, okay, what are the options for STEM kind of stuff? And I was in the robotics club. So there was kind of this like engineering coding side of things that I was excited about. And so my advisor had told me about architecture, and I went into architecture initially in college. That was my like declared major my freshman year, and was enjoying it. But then I transferred. I was at a different school for a semester, and then transferred back to WVU, and took an intro to landscape architecture class because they didn't have architecture at WVU. And I thought, well, landscape architecture sounds kind of close. And I realized that it was truly not the buildings that excited me. It was all the stuff around the buildings that I just loved. And we learned about gardens, and we learned about how cities are made. And it just was it seemed so much more exciting, because when you think about a building, like, you have to have a reason to go into a building. Like, you either live there or you work there, or someone's giving you permission and you're like granted access. And it's, you know, unless it's a library, like a public library or a school or something. And I think what always truly excites me about landscapes in their truest sense in a city, especially like streets and open space, is that it is public and it's for everybody and anybody can use them. And so that has always excited me about landscape architecture. And then I stayed in the landscape architecture program at WVU and got my Bachelor of Science in Landscape Architecture, and then went after that to get my master's in landscape architecture. And a lot of undergraduate programs in landscape architecture are at state schools that have that are part of the agriculture colleges, typically a lot of land grant universities and state schools, so WVU, Purdue, University Chicago, Colorado. A lot of schools have the landscape architecture programs in the agriculture school, so they're not always that well attended because they're not in the liberal arts college, they're not in the arts side of things, even though landscape architecture very much fits there. And so you get a lot of students who kind of find it by way of something else, and a lot of engineering students who were in civil engineering who then decided they might be a little more artistic. They find landscape architecture or architecture and then go into landscape architecture. And my bachelor's degree was very nuts and bolts. We learned how to do all those construction drawings. We learned how to think about plants. Plants are not my specialty. There's somebody else in our office who's the plant person, but we do a lot of selecting of trees and plants and thinking about vegetation in urban settings. And so we learned a lot about that in undergrad. And then I graduated and I realized I didn't really have as much theoretical understanding of landscape architecture and the kind of history of the profession and how landscape architecture fits into the constellation of other professions that we work with on a daily basis. And so I wanted to go to grad school. And so I went to Harvard for grad school and did my master's in landscape architecture and focused a little bit more on how landscape architects can do work at a large scale. So thinking about natural systems in cities. So thinking about stormwater. So when it rains, where does that water go? Thinking about sea level rise in coastal cities, how that's going to impact cities, especially Boston and other places. Pittsburgh's not going to be as impacted. We're going to get people moving to Pittsburgh, which is going to be interesting. But flooding and thinking about water in cities, and then thinking about habitat and forest restoration, and just generally at a larger scale, thinking about landscape architecture at a city level. That's what I did in grad school.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it looks like for our last question, Ms. Virginia wrote, do you think since COVID is bringing people outside more, that cities will want to incorporate and fund more outdoor spaces?
That's a very good question. I think they want to be able to fund more outdoor spaces. I think that funding is stretched very thin at the moment and is being redirected towards more important public health issues in the emergency situation that we're in right now. But I think long term, it has really, I think everything that everybody's talking about right now about the value of outdoor space in cities, that even the smallest little patch of green can provide relief for so many people, that there's value in these spaces, and that we need to dedicate funding to improving them and maintaining them or building new outdoor spaces. And so I think long term it has really been an eye-opener for a lot of folks. I think all the landscape architects in the world are like, this is what we've been saying all along. And it's horrific that it has taken this to be valuing outdoor space like this. And of course that's not how we would have wanted that value to be now seen, but it is something that I think has happened. And I think for many people, getting out of the cycle of the like grind of getting up, commuting, going to work in the ways that we had been doing only a year ago, all of a sudden people are thinking about where they're living and how they're living and how they might do that differently in the future. And so it's very interesting to be seeing and witnessing and living during this time. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Nina, for being here.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, Trinity.
Have you ever done real estate?
In what way? Like buying property?
Yeah.
So my husband and I are kind of in real estate business somewhat because he owns 2 breweries. So that's his full-time job, and I kind of on the side help him design the spaces that he has. But we're not in real estate, but we work with a lot of real estate related folks. So developers, for one, developers typically have a larger company that owns lots of land, maybe bigger pieces of land or lots of smaller pieces of land. And then they rent that to either residents or office space or things like that. So we will work for people who are in the real estate world, but I'm not in the real estate world, but it's very aligned with landscape architecture. So there's a lot of overlap. I went to school with a lot of people who were getting their degree in real estate management or just urban planning and urban design is very much related to real estate development. Yeah. Are you interested in real estate?
A little when I get older.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I would encourage you to look at and research urban planning and urban design and real estate development and see how those things relate to each other, because there's a lot of overlap and a lot of interesting probably content out there for you to dive into.
Anybody else? Any last minute questions?
Mr. Jeremy, he's down.
Yeah, I'll be here. Don't worry about it. I got you. You can keep drilling the Spanish alphabet. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for
Thank you
being
all.
here. Can we have if not cameras on, at least microphones unmuted? Round of applause for Ms. Nina, please.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much.
If anybody wants to be a landscape architect, just reach out to Jeremy and he can find me and we can give you more info.
Can you put your email in the chat?
Yeah, yep.
And don't forget, everybody, that the journal for this will be posted as soon as this is over. In addition to that, because we don't have a Friday speaker next week, we are going to do a Black History Month movie night. So we have a couple of options, and we'll be checking in with you next week about what you think, but come in with your own ideas about what you think would be a fun yet appropriate movie for us all to watch together. I'll probably share it on my screen and we'll all just kind of hang out for a little bit and you'll get paid to be there. So one last thank you and round of applause to Ms. Nina. Thank you very much, Ms. Nina. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, nice to see you. Bye.
Yeah, have a great weekend.
Thank you.